Okay, are we streaming? I think we're streaming. All right, I did it. I'm back. Um, it's been a few secs here. I took a week off, and I'm super late on my second week. So it's like I'm like double late, and then it's like if I was gonna be late on the second week, it's like I'm at the end of the night, so I'm like as late as I could be on the day that I'm being late on the second week. Yeah, streaming. So at this point, it's 11:30. Streaming to no one, but that's okay because most people probably aren't going to be watching it in real time anyways, and hopefully it'll actually be something that you might click on at a later date on the next week. And also I will be posting everything on YouTube. I know that Facebook actually deletes everything, and so does Twitch. But I have those recordings. I just have to actually put them up on YouTube. It's been a busy couple of weeks, and I have a history of getting really caught up in what I'm doing, and sometimes I'm not even the best at responding to texts when I get really deep into what I'm doing. But in this case, when I'm actually like at the stream every week, that's a thing. It's like, oh shoot, I gotta actually do this, and then I'm like, the first thing that I think of, like I do with everything, is like, is it efficient? Is that a good use of my time? Is that efficient? And often I have a problem where I'm not very good at showing people things until I feel really good about it. Until I feel like I've already tackled the criticism that they might give me, and usually it turns out that doesn't. It kind of actually works out that by the time I've actually tackled all those things, it's like done. And I've actually probably done a bunch of things probably not as efficiently as I could have if I had just shared the process. But yeah, sharing is tough for me. And I also had to take a bit of a week off, just some life stuff, some renovations, tax stuff, and also kind of just like got hung up on this tree for this project. Because this tree is kind of like the centerpiece, and I really had a vision of how I kind of wanted it, but it was a very hazy vision, and I didn't really know what it was. And I tried, and I tried all these different things, and I thought that it was done, but then I just wasn't happy with it. And I ended up kind of going back and actually, you can see the reference here. I had all these different examples of having this kind of like crazy, twisty, windy, kind of trippy tree that had this kind of like this style and this kind of character to it. And I just endlessly tweaked until I kind of felt right, but it just kind of like it never felt right. And so like kind of once it might look good from one angle, and it's a good learning experience for me, like how actually complex the structure of trees really are. Like if you kind of look at this, it kind of just seems like it's this, and it has this basic shape, but it's actually like in this tree, or this branch kind of looks like it's just going out to the side, but it's like actually going further out. And then so if you kind of reconstruct that, how you think it goes, it ends up being it looks great from this angle, but then from another angle it looks totally weird and fake and 2D or something. So anyways, I eventually came back to what I was even, what I've heard over and over and over throughout this journey learning CG. And it's a thing that I have a hard time with, which I'm trying to come around to, which is just that you always need a reference. You always need to have something to try and replicate. Otherwise, and like the big saying is, how else are you going to know that it's good? How else are you going to know that it's right? and that's very valuable. And my problem was I couldn't find a reference tree that fit the hazy vision of what I thought that it would be in my mind. And then I kind of eventually realized that the only thing that was going to feel like it really felt right in this scene was the actual tree that's in the picture. And it's a cool tree. It's a worthwhile tree to try and replicate. And so the way that I kind of pushed it in my own way, because I really wanted to be a blossoming tree, was that I just, instead of using pine needles or whatever, I just had cherry blossoms. And it's not that far-fetched, because it's like South Korea in these mountains, and there's a lot of blooming trees, the Japanese sakura, and a lot of actual cherry trees actually have similar styles. And there's also the bonsai tree, which this basically is a bonsai tree, and there's cherry blossom bonsai trees. So it's not even that much of a stretch to actually get there. So anyways, that's I'm ranting on too much about that, because this is gonna take way too long if I spend this much time on just something like that. But the tree was a big thing. I wouldn't say wasted, but I got hung up on it, and I spent too much time on it. And these are the things that that I was told to try and avoid, and I just couldn't help it. Every time I tried to move on and do some work on something bigger, but every time I just look at the tree and I was like, I just gotta figure out this tree. And then once I kind of recreated this design, I can kind of zoom in. So I kind of got the structure here. This is not complete, by the way. I have tons to do with everything, but I kind of at least got the overall kind of ish. Whoops. Structure of the tree. I revert to using the Houdini navigation, and then it gets weird things. But anyways, I kind of ended up settling on that, and then it was just a matter of actually properly being able to UV it. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today is a bunch of UV stuff, and being able to figure out how to actually get the complexity of all this bark and kind of make it believable, which is it's one of those things where it's I know that people can do it, so it's how are they doing it? Because that's kind of what I need to know how to do. So yeah, I'm going to just move this over a little bit, just in case someone is heckling me, and as hoped for, we have Farshad heckling me. Sweet. Oh yeah, the YouTube channel. Yeah, it's funny. Actually, that's a good question. Actually, I'm gonna check on that. Because YouTube was being you have to verify your account, but then once you verified it, it said that it was all good, but then it actually wasn't. And so you had to actually start streaming as if you were a YouTube person, and then it asks you to reach, and then it was another 24 hours. So let's just see if I can. Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that. That I should be doing the YouTube thing. Oh well, it'll have to be next time. I'll upload it all to YouTube. But yeah, I'm getting this photo. I don't know if it's the same photo. Anyways, so yeah, I kind of wanted to just talk a bunch about the UVs and being able to actually properly be able to kind of texture paint all these different things, and because that's kind of what you can do. And it was a bit of a bit of an ordeal to figure out just how to actually do it within Substance Painter. And yeah, and that's kind of what, maybe I'll just kind of jump into some of that right now. The first thing would be kind of like, UVs. So if I go into Houdini here, for those of you who don't know, this is kind of like a very basic way of just kind of talking about UVs. It's basically the way that if you UV is basically just like another way of saying X and Y coordinates. X and Y were taken, so they're using U and V instead. So it's a way of describing the X and Y of a grid. So it's a way of being able to, X1, X2, X3, or like U1, U2, 3, 4, 5 going along, and then V going along here. So it's a way of describing an individual coordinate on a square. So this coordinate right here would be, U6, V10 or whatever. And that's a way that you can kind of reference that. And so what UV mapping is all about is being able to, it's just all about, we're trying to live with this, doing this 3D art, but we're really used to, in fact, the only way that we can do proper art is that because we're working on a screen, a 2D screen, is that we have to make 2D art, and then be able to translate it into 3D. That's kind of just the only way you can do it. And it's also a very good way of optimizing things, because it's quick. So it's kind of amazing. I think I've talked about it before, but yeah, it's amazing what they can fit on a 2D plane. So this is just a very, if you had to color this cube somehow, what you would do is you would cut along these seams, unwrap it, so it's like this, and then you do your design. I guess it would be the flip side of this. You do your design on this, and then you'd wrap it up, and now all of a sudden your cube has a design on it. And that's kind of the fundamental thing. And this is very literal. Like there are seams often, and you're actually like cutting these seams. And so the way that it can get a little bit more complicated is if you have more complex shapes, because a cube breaks apart nicely into. Sorry, I gotta remember to actually look at the camera. I think that probably helps. You got to remember to, like, to be able to. Not you have to be able to. There's you have to like realize that there's so many different shapes, and being able to actually like cut along the seams in different ways in the right way is actually just like being able to flatten a 3D image in a way that you can project onto it can be quite challenging. And it's indeed one of the biggest issues, or like one of the hardest things, and in a legendary way, quite hard to kind of deal with. But technology has kind of come a long way, and I feel like I'm kind of just in time to get into some of these things because they've actually made things a lot easier. And because to make it worse, if you have a very complex shape, you only get one of these grids. And so one of these grids can represent one texture. And by texture, I mean like a photo. So if I was going to project a photo onto this thing, it would be onto this script. But you only get one of these photos. So you can imagine that this was like a very huge cube with lots of different dimensions, and you only had one picture to actually describe, to be able to kind of bend into that. If it's not a high enough resolution, it's going to get stretched, so it's going to end up looking like really blurry, and that's a kind of a big problem. And there's kind of ways of getting around it, but yeah, especially now. So basically, you can have an 8K texture, And there's the other ways of getting around it, but now you can, it's like a very new technology where you can basically just have as many of these as you want, and you have to kind of organize them. So without getting into that too much, I feel like I could easily just like end up ranting about all this for too long, but forgot that I have to readjust my Houdini as well. Boop. Okay, music a little bit loud. Yeah, the music's a little bit loud. Okay. Maybe that's a little bit better. Cool. So yeah, so some of my challenges. Let's get into this tree. Trees. Not loading. So, long story short, the idea is to be able to have a separate UV map for each one of these branches, so that, and then within Substance Painter, you can actually paint the texture on. I'm just kind of realizing now that if I actually try and explain all this, it'll actually like literally take hours. My entire process of kind of coming to these conclusions. But long story short, I kind of got to the point where I was able to get each of these pieces and have them be smooth. So basically it's kind of like each one of these, like kind of earlier on, each one of these was actually like its own separate piece, and to be able to actually like combine them so that they actually look, so they're all one geometry, kind of actually like, well, here you can kind of see, this is kind of how they were before. It's like you can kind of see that there's like these kind of weird seams, and they're like separate different pieces. And so this is a very common workflow in Houdini, so here I'm just kind of like filling in some of the weird gaps, and then you actually convert something to a volume. And this so now it's kind of represented by voxels. And then once you have done that, then you can kind of smooth it. And then you can kind of smooth it in lots of different ways to kind of get this more like kind of like organic look and feel to it. And then you convert it back to polygons. And now there's way too many polygons, so poly reduce it to less. And then the kind of the main thing here is that because now it's the problem is that like now that I've up here, if you look at my kind of attributes here, I have I have like position, color, and all these different things, but mostly I have all these different groups, and it's kind of how I'm able to actually identify all these different pieces to give them different UVs and give them different, and like isolate the different branches, and give them different materials, and etc., etc. And so once that happens, you actually lose that, but you can actually do a group transfer, and what that kind of does is it kind of does a proximity thing, and basically just kind of finds all the groups that are that are attached to these points on this, and then attempt to try to transfer them over. And it actually takes a little while, but it actually does it fairly well. So I'm able to do that, and then actually be able to isolate the groups afterwards, which is super handy because I'm gonna need that later on, and then kind of keep going down the chain, and then at the end I actually do a similar thing where I do the same thing. I'm worried that it's going to cook because this actually takes a long time, but essentially I ended up having all these down here, and then I still have all my different groups that I've done. And then the nice thing about that is that This is getting a little bit technical, but I guess it's kind of fun to share. Just the fact that, you know, I have all these groups, and then if I turn these into these groups, I rename these groups into something called, you know, just tree 0 through 8. Then I can use this name node, which is cool because it's able to turn groups into an attribute that's attached to the point. And basically here it's just saying a star basically just means anything. So I'm including anything that says tree that has anything after it, i.e., you know, tree 01, tree 02, tree 03, and then basically make an attribute out of it and replace the tree with udim. And so now I have a primitive attribute called udim, and so they all have their own tiles, or they only each one of these sections basically have their own udim attribute. And then I actually put this in through a loop, basically. And if there's no loop and I'm redoing the UV, they'll basically be all on one tile. So if I just kind of do, this might take a little bit to cook. I'm kind of afraid to do this actually, to be honest, but we'll try. We'll give it a try. See how long it takes. Okay, it's not looking too bad. Flattening islands. So this is kind of like a node that they've made that just kind of does a lot of the work for you in terms of doing UVs. It's part of the Side Effects Labs collection of tools, which actually started off as just being like game development stuff, and ended up being just so useful for everything that they released it as something separate. But it's pretty intelligent at actually just being able to just UV everything for you, and then it'll just work generally. And the neat thing about it is that it actually has this udim target tile thing here. So it'll say, like, you know, once it's actually all done, what tiles is it going to be on? And if we were talking, like as I said before, everything used to be you get one texture, you get one chance, you get like to be able to do everything, and now you get to have as many as you want. So this is basically just saying, well, if you want to have a bunch, which one do you want this to be on? And so what this for each loop is actually doing is basically just saying, like, for each one of these different groups, based on which iteration it is in this for each loop, put it on that corresponding tile. So if it's the first element in the group, so say this is like the first element is just the trunk, then put that in group 1. And then if it's the second element, or put that as udim target tile 2. Now it looks like this is finally done. And so if I go to a split view here and put this to UV view, you can see what it's done. I mean, it's done a pretty good job of splitting up all these pieces. You can see why it took so long, right? And it actually does an incredible job of splitting up all the different pieces onto a UV tile. But the problem is that even if you're dealing with an 8K texture, if this is an 8K texture, 8K by 8K, and this is the tree trunk right here, this whole tree trunk is still getting a very small chunk of that 8K texture. And so it's just, you're not going to get a very good resolution. So that's why that's kind of the beauty of being able to separate these parts and being able to have a separate texture. I hope that kind of makes sense. And so if we kind of skip ahead to I'm not going to go through that for you because it actually goes through every single one, and as I said, and puts it on a different tile. And so now if we kind of look at what it's done, it's taken, I'm just going to go to the full view and just go to, so what it's done is it's actually kind of taken each, so this is the trunk here, and this is like the next section, and so it's actually taken all these parts and put them on. So it's able to use a full 8K resolution picture to project onto each one of these things, and it just helps with having higher resolution things. And the workflow for being able to actually get this into Substance was, it was just kind of a bit of a pain in the ass. Oh no, I don't want that to cook. Please don't. This is why I file catch this, because this took like 10 minutes to cook or something stupid like that. Anyways, so it was a bit of a thing to get all these things together. Anyways, once I got them, I kind of had some issues with the texture projecting not really working the way that I wanted it to, and it was actually like kind of a big moment yesterday, where I brought it up in class, and I was just like, what, like, this is, because I kind of thought that these all had to be very straight, because if I'm gonna project the UV onto it, then as if the bark, so if the bark has lines, and then you're going to project the bark onto those lines, and then it curves, then because you want those lines to actually fit the curves of the branches. And so I had it in my head that these actually had to be straight, which would have made sense, and I was having a hard time making it straight and all these things. And then I kind of, in class, my teacher basically just told me that, like, no, actually this is how you can actually like project and rotate the brush as you go. And this is what I'm gonna show you in a second. This is really exciting, because basically all of this was kind of just leading up to being able to do this, and it's actually, now that I can do it, it's really cool. And I actually haven't even fully done it since I've finally re-exported and redone all the UVs and kind of gotten ready. So let's dive into there and just do that right now, because it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. So I'll just start from scratch, because I literally haven't done anything. So if I'm starting with a new project, and I'm selecting this one, and this says test 109, and this is actually just, this is not a joke. I started with test 1, exporting from Houdini into Substance, and I literally cracked 100, and then I'm onto 109 of tests going from Houdini into Substance, which is, I don't know, it feels embarrassing, but I don't know. I got there. So anyways, so the main thing, if you use, and this is brand new, a 2020 Substance Painter. This is like the industry standard for painting textures onto everything, and they just began to be able to have this, so it's cool that they have it. And so import it, discard that one. And while that's loading, the other thing that I'll note is that what's really important that it's just kind of another kind of gotcha, or like caveat, that I just never, there's just certain, really, I've been finding with learning CG is there's just like so many different, sometimes just like the most obvious things are the hardest to actually learn, because it's so obvious to everyone or anyone who's working in the studio, or they learned it, it's just like, and some of those things are just like, you can't find that anywhere. And some of these like really weird, strange things can hold you back a little bit. So yeah, I think one thing that I kind of found was that actually just, all the different programs, they use materials in different ways, and they all have different communicate in different ways, and they have different formats. There's like an FBX format and AB and dot and a limbic format for being able to transfer files between each other. But kind of one big thing that I've learned is that I still don't know exactly how it works, but whatever, like when you assign a material to something. So basically, I mean, these are my materials up here. These are Redshift materials, just that I made for random different things. These are some of the things that have come with Megascans, stuff like that. But so when you assign a material to something, you can either give it a group and say, I want to assign just this group of polygons to this material, and then you would essentially, just kind of drag that in there. And when you do that, you can see that it's created this primitive attribute called /mat/branch, and that just seems like like shop network. That's a very like Houdini thing. That's like, but for when it exports, it translates that into something that seems to be fundamental for other programs to understand. So in a way, it's like grouping things, and it's kind of weird because even though I'm not actually giving it a material on its way out, it's very important that before I actually send it to Substance Designer, I declare that it has these 3 materials. And so kind of what I've done here is I've actually taken I've taken basically like I've made two materials, one for these main branches which I want to paint over, and then another for where I want to like kind of be a bit more detailed and do the specific texture, and then another one for these smaller branches, which I don't really care so much. I'm just going to put a texture on it and just let it be, and then there's going to be another one for the leaves as well. And so these are literally just empty materials with a name, and by giving so I got 2 materials here, 1 and 2. By giving these groups this material, and then by giving these 3 groups, the small branches material, when it exports as an FBX, Substance will pick that up, and then also Unreal will pick that up. That's also another way that that'll communicate with Unreal, because it knows, and it makes sense after the fact. Like, it actually makes, because how else would these programs know that those are the things that you need to assign materials to? But it's just like, I don't know. There's no tutorial that tells you that. It's kind of one of those things you just kind of have to figure out. Because again, as soon as you know it, it makes so much sense that you might not even think to pass it on to someone else. And so I feel like there's like a bunch of those weird roadblocks in the CG world that can get you, and that I've kind of run into. And that's why it's also, I think I'm stoked to be able to have, someone that I'm forced to chat with, once a week, that will actually know the answers to these questions. So that's cool. So I wanted to do this live here, and getting to this is kind of the main event. There's some other cool things, but this is actually just, for me, this is just really exciting. So here we have our tree, and we have our 2 groups. These are our 2 materials that it's going to end up exporting. And in this view, you can see our different UDIM tiles all nicely lined up for our main tree. And if we go to small branches, you can see our UDIM tiles for that, which are one, and they return over there. And then they also are able to actually select the individual UDIM tiles, which is also cool. And what's kind of cool is that, like, as long as they're on the same material, now you can actually paint over them, which is pretty gnarly. And so you can see when I paint on here, it's painting on here, and when I actually paint on here, you can see that it's painting over here, which is really cool. And that's just, I'm just painting color right now. And so the idea behind this is that we're actually going to be painting, 4 or 5 different texture maps all at once, which is, very cool. So let's do that. So these are I've downloaded a bark texture from Megascans. And I'm just going to import these. I'll probably end up making my own, because you can this same company, Substance, they have a couple other programs, and one of them you can actually make your own textures out of actual photos of bark, which is really cool. But all the things, I can't do everything at once. I'll get there. So if I define all these as a texture, and say that I want to just only import them to this project, then I have imported these maps, and then I can say for this brush over here that right now it's just color, but if I enable height, rough, and normal map, then I have these slots, and then I can actually just drag height, or the diffuse, the height, the normal, and the roughness. And again, so these are just kind of, I've talked about this before, but yeah, these are basically, this is kind of the way that we try and describe things in 3D. You have your color, and that's one thing, your diffuse, but then there's so many different ways that so many different things that are going on for us to actually be able to interpret light and actual in things in certain ways. And these 4 end up being like the bare bones. Like there's a bunch of other ones, but you can actually get away with pretty good results with, well, actually not like, you can actually get away with like 3 essentially. So the roughness is basically saying how much it reflects light, how shiny it is. So if you look at this roughness map, you can see in the where it's white, it's like a value of 1, which means it's super rough, which means it barely reflects any light at all. And then where it's gray, it's say closer to a value of 0.5, which means it's kind of reflective. Bark isn't a very reflective substance, so you would expect a roughness map for bark to be pretty white, because white means not reflective. And then the normal map, the reason why it's kind of this funky color is because there's actually 3 different, there's a different it's storing 3D coordinates, or not coordinates, but it's storing vectors within it that are kind of essentially kind of just telling it how light should bounce off of it. And so that basically kind of just says, if a light's coming from over here, is this thing in the way, or like how is it actually how much of it is it going to actually receive that light, and how much is going to bounce off, which can end up making a very big difference on how things look, especially, and it can give things a lot of depth. I don't think I explained that very well, but I'm gonna keep going. And then you can have height maps, and height maps can make a huge difference in things. I'm gonna give an example of how height maps work in just a second, but before I do that, I just want to actually just get to the point of what I'm trying to say here. So when you kind of just like regular put this on here, like it's kind of cool. You have this like tiled pattern. You'd have to figure out the tile, and then it's all going in the same direction, and you don't really have a whole lot of kind of say. It's like trying to like make its best guess of like what direction things are going on, and that's all fine and dandy. But the way to really do it is to use this projection view. Is it that one? Yeah. Okay. What did I do here? Okay. I'm not sure if I must have undid all those things that I did there. I'm just gonna put these in. Okay, that's interesting. So this is, you can kind of get the general idea of this. It's supposed to be, and I was doing it earlier, it was way bigger. Which means, yeah, so there's totally a way of zooming this thing. And again, it's just probably some weird feature that I don't know about. Let's try this again. I think I did something weird there. In fact, I'm just going to start just for the purposes of not trying to troubleshoot some bullshit here. I'm just going to start again on that one, because this is supposed to be, you know, a cool moment here. Where I finally got this going. Got this new layer, that's what I want. Could have been on the wrong, yeah, main tree. Yeah, good. New layer. We import these bad boys. Know what I'm saying? Base color. Height. Ah, I missed. Fuck. Normal. And then without messing around, let's go into projection. Sweet. This totally doesn't work. Dope. Well, serves me right for trying to do things live. Okay, well, you can get an idea. It was working really well before where, so I can kind of like get an idea. There's definitely like a single key that I need to press to adjust the size of this thing. The idea is that this would be a huge thing. But it's kind of I can kind of like rotate this around and then kind of paint that on. So it's like I'm kind of like stamping these little bits onto here. You know, so if I want to go up here and paint this, and I want this bark to be a little bit bigger, I can kind of rotate it so it fits the curvature of the tree. And then kind of like, I guess I would be zooming out so it's a little bit bigger. Oh, you know what? I just remembered what I need to do. I need to make it tileable. There we go. Aha. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. So I was just getting one square. But if you make it tileable, this is a tileable texture, so it's a repeating pattern. And so now I kind of have this like freedom where I can kind of be like, okay, well, I want this. Like if we look at the reference, it's thicker down here, and then it's like it thins out quite a bit, like almost kind of. There's not a whole lot going on down there. So it's like we can kind of translate that to I'm just trying to get my I'm not doing height edit either. I was just doing a test there. So let me start again. This time with the height, roughness, and normal, because that makes a big difference. And we already got our base color in there. Height, normal, roughness. Okay, now I think we're really cooking with some fuel here. I think this is gonna work. Butane, fucking butane fuel is what we're cooking with, and it's like it's fiery hot. I'll keep forgetting that I might be getting heckled. Oh yeah, what's going on? We got hydrogen up in the house. Guys, I'm finally gonna paint this shit on here. This motherfucking shit. Excuse my language. Damn it, I'm gonna have to change. This is not gonna be suitable for all ages anymore. So let's say that I want to zoom in. Zoom in. Oh, no, I would make this smaller so that the bark's really big. I literally just figured out how to do this this morning. And so the resolution of that's really big, and then now I paint this on. And on over here we have the 2D version, so I can actually see kind of what I'm doing here. So if I want to just like, oops. Oh, I guess these are on different views, so that I can actually kind of I can also rotate this around. So I could, it's kind of like an easy way of doing that as well. Line that up and just paint that bad boy on. And it's nice because it's painting on the normal map, it's painting on the roughness map, all these different things onto there. And then for this section, say I want it to be a little bit, less big, I can kind of, I guess I would be zooming in. And then there's because I'm zooming into this, but then there should be like a larger macro zoom out of the whole thing, which I haven't figured out how to do. Again, it's probably some stupid key, but for now I'm just going to work in this view. And so if I make this a little bit smaller, I can kind of paint that in there too. And it's nice because you can, if you hold down the S key, you can kind of move the texture around. So kind of it deals with some of the tiling issues, because if you just tile something, it'll have a bunch of issues. You'll be able to see a repeating pattern, because you can even see in the background. See this streak here? It's like there it is, there it is, there it is, there it is, there it is. And our eyes are very good at picking up on these things. And so when you can just sample a little bit here, paint a stroke there, and then move it around and move it over here and paint a stroke there, you can get, much more believable results. So yeah, I'm learning how to do this. It's definitely like a bit it's a bit tricky, but I really like it. I think this is the way, and so this is how they do it, folks. This is what they're doing in those big CG workflows. And I mean, this is like basically the most basic thing about it, but it's cool. Like, I mean, you can picture like, oh, I want there to be a knot here on the edge of this, so you can go take a photo of a tree knot and then load it up. Load it up into Substance Alchemist, and it uses AI to intelligently to be able to figure out the depth and the roughness of your photo, and to be able to remove depth, or to remove weird light artifacts and stuff like that. Like the technology is amazing, and so you can take a photo of that, make these maps, and then I can just project that knot onto here, and then if it's like the height is not quite on, then I can actually use a paintbrush to only paint on height, so I can actually obscure the geometry a little bit with just a brush, and that's really cool too. So I'm stoked on that. I'm stoked to spend some time on that, and then once I've done that, you can literally just go to export, and it'll make 2 materials for you, and then you can look at the list of maps, and then it's going to make all these maps for you. And so it's a little bit tricky, because it's not making a set of maps per material. It's making a set of maps per UDIM tile, which means that just for one material, you're actually so it's like, this is a lot of different textures. So there's a couple. It's actually not that hard to set up in Unreal, only because someone recently made a YouTube video about it. It's another one of those things where it's just like, yeah, you can do it. And they recently gave support for UDIM tiles, but it's like, yeah, it's like one of those things where it's just like, if some nice gentleman didn't make a 2-minute YouTube video on how to set up these things in Unreal. I'm just let me just think if I can. Oh yeah, and I think it's as simple as in the project settings you check that you want to be able to use UDIM tiles, and then as you import them, you just import, let's see here, I have my textures in here. And if you, what I did here is I just, basically just imported. If you have it set, there's a setting, I can't remember exactly, but if you have checked the right setting, there might be one other thing you have to do. Then if you, it sees these sets as essentially one file. Or no, it'll actually take, it'll take this base color 1002, it'll take base color 1003, 1004, 1005, and it'll take all those base colors and it'll interpret that as one file, as being 1.23456 or whatever, and then it's able to behind the scenes put those all, work some magic and put those all into one texture. And so it imports as these wild looking textures, which when you open it literally displays as nothing, because it just can't display it because it's 6 different textures all at once. I hope I didn't break that because it just went all black, but yeah. Long story short, that makes that work. So it's exciting. I retrospectively went too far into this, but it's something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and I feel way better just knowing that this kind of workflow where I can just give things UVs, and it's actually I was going way more intense with how I was doing UVs in order to be able to project them properly, but it turns out that as long as you can just give it with this workflow, you can just give it UVs, and Substance will be pretty good at just being able to figure out, and then you can just paint them on in that respect, which is cool. And it's just so funny because there actually literally isn't, even after my teacher was like, yeah, you just UV project. I looked up YouTube videos on UV project, and there's not a single one that's doing this. All of them are just for painting on decals onto sides of machinery. Because apparently that's just what everyone does. Everyone just has spaceships and mechanical metal futuristic machines and spacecrafts and vehicles and stuff like that, and you put decals on those things. But I just want to make like a cool tree and like a sweet fucking environment, man. And I don't know, I guess the kids aren't doing that these days. I just wanted to paint a cool bark onto a tree. So whatever. So that's why man, the YouTube videos that I'm gonna be able to come up with after this, I definitely look forward to this. It's good to kind of get this stuff out there, but I definitely look forward to actually making some some actual videos and to actually help people and share the things that I've learned. And I'm doing these streams as a fail-safe because I always really like the idea of doing that, and then sometimes don't. So this way, I actually, at least there's something out there documenting my experience. So yeah, and I just did this the other day, where it was actually kind of like recreated the landscape of this area, and all I have is just like some placeholder kind of grass area and some placeholder rock, and I'm it helps a lot just being able to put everything into perspective. I kind of have to make some guesses in terms of what I think is I feel like I'm gonna be able to get some cool angles of the tree from different spots. This is me playing around with, because when it gets rainy, I'm gonna have to actually have a different material for each one of these rocks. This is just an example of a rained on version of this rock. but yeah, I kind of stepped away from a lot of the things. I was spending so much time in Houdini with all these different effects, and I got pretty far with a lot of these different things, just kind of testing things out to see what I would actually be able to do. And then kind of once I got there, I was like, okay, well, I need to actually step by and actually back and actually, you know, build this environment, and then actually, you know, do all these things. So I'm going to be doing that for the next little bit. Just the next step is to put actual trees in here, and then kind of the little details. I got as far as doing like the simulation. It's in place here. I haven't actually animated it yet, but you can kind of see in the opening shot from before, it kind of starts with these petals. I can kind of show you so basically what I did was I took these rocks and I exported them out of here. And it's funny, even that was actually kind of an annoying bitch to do. It actually ended up being so easy, but it was hard to figure out. Just to export these geometries in the same way that they were in their exact world space, so that I could sim off of them and use them as a collider, and then when I bring the sim back in, it'll be exactly in place. But anyways, it actually ended up being super easy for reference. I was trying to do all these different things and things that were recommended to me even in my class, but it ends up literally being like you know, file export selected. So psh, sweet. Yeah, and I think I showed a little bit of the petals before, but yeah, these are just kind of like, so I have basically these. It's neat because it's the same the petals that I'm using for the actual cherry blossoms. I actually have, it kind of came with these. It also had like some examples of them. Like I downloaded this off the internet. I had to do a little bit of work to kind of just separate it out. But long story short, if I just put this into the material here, that's them. And then if I do a little bit of that, not that. Just pretend like that render did not happen. I'm not showing up because they're probably not actually on here. Okay, well, I'm not gonna. I don't think I need to spend the time to actually. I can't remember what I did with the material where it's all weird. Matte flower. I'll allow myself 2 seconds to. Or what's the error it's giving me? Flower is not a valid group. Oh, okay. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. So anyways, these are the, it's a terrible looking render. I'm not sure what's going on right now, but you get the idea. It doesn't matter. But basically these are the flowers that I'm using for the tree, and it also has like some scattered ones, and they all have the same UVs, and so it's nice. I'm able to actually use these petals to kind of instance onto the particle simulation, And so the particle simulation, it's doing a bunch of cool things with spinning like rotation, using, so there's the velocity force, which is V, but then there's like rotational force, which is U, you know, which I haven't used too much, but it's actually super useful for things like this, where the pedal is essentially 2D, so it's going to be, it kind of wants to spin. It's like not really, when it's floating through the air, it's not really able to, there's nothing to stabilize it because it's just 2D. So it has a tendency to want to spin around, and so this is able to actually have and there's a lot of pressure going up. I feel like I probably talked about this before. But yeah, long story short, I'm able to use these pedals for the simulation, which is cool. Let me just go back into the simulation. Close that for now. And so so basically I'm giving it I took the reference of where, like in my actual thing, I think I knew that I had like kind of a placeholder, which is basically this sphere. That's what I was doing. That's what I was as a placeholder for this particle sim. So just kind of using that, and then putting a grid where that was. And I ended up moving it over and then just scattering some points onto it, just a couple, and then giving that a p-scale. And the p-scale is really important because it's even though it's just particles, when you give it a p-scale and you actually in the particle simulation want them to collide with each other, it has to figure out how big it thinks it is in order to figure out how it's going to collide. So if it's super small, then it's not going to collide until it hits that point right there, but it's always going to be expressed just as a particle, so you can tell it that it's actually this big, and then when this point hits there, then they're going to collide. And you can always, like, once you actually give something a p-scale attribute, you can always kind of get a feel for how big that actually is, by doing something like copy to points. And what this does is it just, whatever points you have, and whatever you feed into the other side, such as a sphere, it will copy those things to those points. And you kind of get it, and it'll take into account p-scale. It's an attribute that the copy to points recognize. It's a universal attribute in Houdini that it'll recognize to actually to figure out how big it is. So I'm putting this in, so if I actually just put in a thing here, and I should just rename or just rescale this to 1, then all of a sudden that's how big they are. Right now you can see they're really small, which is what we want. And so this is actually just giving it a kind of a random orientation to keep it going. I'm not going to bore you with it, but also it's giving it an initial W, which is the spinning force. And this is also giving it some mass. So basically what I'm doing is I'm actually like running it through an initial simulation just to place the actual points. Let's just see if I can. All right, there we go. So if you go to the beginning, I basically have this grid just a little bit, and the only reason why I only have 4 or 5 because I'm just gonna I'm just scattering points off of it for just a couple seconds. And I have this set up as I have this grid, this existing geometry set up as a collision source. And the way that I did that was I just this is my incoming geometry, and I just set up a geometry source. And there's different ways of doing this, but I think in this case I actually literally used the shelf tool, the shelf tools. I have a mixed feelings about the shelf tools, but for some things where you just like want to get something done, sometimes they actually can work for doing something like this. So in this case, it's literally clicking on this, and because down here I have my current simulation that I'm working on, pop placement selected, and then I go to collisions and go static object, it'll kind of set this up for me, and then inside the pop network automatically create this thing that's linked to that output, and kind of set up a collider for me, which is nice, using a VDB volume. So anyways, long story short, I'm just doing a quick like preliminary simulation, just to like, as if, and I think I gave a little bit of wind to it, and then also just had it set up so that like when it hits the ground, just stop, and then it kind of just stops. And then this is like a hack node, but it can be really useful when you're kind of just trying to get things done, and it's very useful for things like this, where it's like, because you get, instead of caching something or something like that, it's literally just takes the input and it just stashes it. So I press stash, and then it just it's a placeholder. Or not a placeholder, but it essentially just does a little mini file cache of what this is. So I can disconnect this now, and this just holds this, which is awesome. So it's just like, good, that just does that. And now I've performed that simulation. I don't have to worry about time. I don't have to worry about any of that. I'm just using these points, and I don't have to worry about any of those things. And it's, if I want to redo it, it's really easy. I just redo the simulation and then connect this and press dash again. So that's cool. And so now for the actual simulation, let me just bring back the geometry so I can see it. What did I do here? Oh yeah, so I had to kind of mess with a couple of things to get this to work the way that I wanted it, just because left over from this simulation, that's odd. It is not showing me. My geometry spreadsheet seems to have stopped working for some reason. Gonna need that. Surely you have some attributes, do you not? Huh, tough crowd. Could be that I stashed it at the wrong moment, and that there actually wasn't anything in there at the time. Oh yeah, that's what happened. So I think I actually pressed stash when the particle simulation hadn't even started yet. So there's actually no particles in there. Cool. So yeah, so basically what had happened was I was trying to do my simulation, and I was just like, I want it to start with these petals just sitting on the ground with nothing else happening. And that wasn't, obviously the simulation wasn't liking that, because it's got all these, it's remembering all the different attributes that it had as it exited the last thing. And you kind of think that it would just kind of turn off all the velocity and stuff like that because it stopped, but no such case. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm kind of just resetting some of the things. So when this particle simulation stops, it actually has an attribute that it says that it changes to 0 to say that these particles have stopped. They're not, don't activate the simulation anymore. So I have to manually go in and just say stops no more. And then here I'm just literally just resetting. I should be saying like v at v, a vector at v. I did it with this one. These are now 0. So now, because otherwise when you go into the simulation, it's gonna be like it's gonna be spawning particles, and then it's gonna be like, oh, we're chill. Oh wait, you have a velocity of going that way? Okay, and then it's just all over the place. Anyway, so once we get going, I'll put this up here. Oh, I think I just had a crash. Okay. Yeah, I'd report that. Well, shit. I'd like to say it didn't happen all the time, but it does. Yeah. Anyways, I'm probably getting way too into the craziness with all that stuff, but I think it's you know, knowing that probably not too many people are going to watch this, it's therapeutic for me to just talk about it. I like it. Gotta get it out there. And it's probably good. It's probably good for me to actually say all these things. And obviously it'd be nice to actually properly teach somebody. And you can't actually teach anybody until you're able to break things down properly. So yeah, the terrain in here was also another way. It's kind of cool. There's actually like, I'm using Houdini engine for this one. So this is actually an HDA. So Houdini and Unreal are able to talk to each other, which is amazing. Where you can actually build tools, and it's pretty simple to build the tools. And you put a wrapper over it, and you can import it into Unreal, and you're actually running a little mini Houdini in Unreal, which is really cool. And just to like very quickly demonstrate this terrain thing. Here's the terrain tool. I'll just chuck this in here. Might regret this, but also I'm in like foliage mode, so it's probably not gonna like that very much either. Oh, it's probably gonna really like that I'm changing out of foliage mode while it's loading. I actually had like a bit of a disaster yesterday where I was working with this tool, and when you work in this tool, it has you're kind of using this tool, and then at the very end you bake it. This is essentially just kind of making this landscape into something that Unreal is able to understand a little bit better. And I kind of baked it, and I was just like, oh, and I wasn't sure what I was doing, and I undid baking it. and then it crashed, and then I literally couldn't open the project again. Well, I could open the project, but I couldn't open this particular map for this, my main. I essentially couldn't open the project. But I was actually kind of very lucky because just because I was messing around with the tool in Houdini, and I've kind of learned by now after a couple years that when you're messing around with anything to do with Houdini that you don't fully understand, you need to back your shit up, because if you don't understand exactly what you're doing, you can really mess things up. So I just happened to make a backup of the entire level before I was kind of experimenting with some of the features in this terrain thing, and that ended up saving my ass substantially. I had to I only lost a couple hours of work, and I think, as usual, when you redo those couple hours, they're always way better than the first time. One annoying thing is that all the animation has to be relinked. So it's like so I have all these animation tracks. That's just for the main thing. Inside here, I have inside of every clip, I have a lot of animation for all the weather and the camera moves, and yeah, all that is gone at the moment. So it was a bit of a reset, bit of a meltdown yesterday, because it kind of got to the point, as of 2 days ago, it had been 2 weeks, and all I really had to show for all the work that I'd done was a slightly improved tree. and it was really stressful. I was like, okay, I still wasn't even happy with the tree. I was close, but I had to set it aside, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start working on the environment. And then I started working on the environment, and it was going well. I managed to get pretty far in a day, and then it was like show and tell day for our class, and then it was a total meltdown, and all of a sudden my project wouldn't open. I was like, sweet, this is how she goes. Cool. Let's see if Houdini opened back up. Okay, we're back. So here I have this is kind of cool. So we're in the simulation view right now for what I did with the pedals. Essentially what I wanted to have was the opening shot was having these pedals, and they're kind of flowing along, and then they kind of flow off into the distance, and then the camera tilts up, and then we see the tree. And you can do this, relatively easily by using in the pop network, in the simulation network, using something called pop curve force. And it's kind of relatively straightforward. It essentially takes a curve input, and this is just something that even a simple curve like this, it's kind of just I don't even know how I would do that in Unreal, but in Houdini it's quite a bit easier. So I think I just made the curve here, and I think I used one because it can be kind of hard to navigate where you're going, where you are in 3D space, because how is it going to know where, if you put you want to put a point here, how is it supposed to know where, if that's that could be 10,000 miles away, like down there, or it could be literally like on this plane. So I've kind of, it took me a while, but just like I've kind of gotten the habit of like whenever I can leveraging just being able to use this point snapping method. And so if I draw a curve and just have this highlighted, then it's looking for a point on here to attach your curve. So this is just, it just kind of makes it easy to draw a line that goes along the actual geometry. So I can just attach to that point. I want to go to that point. I want to go to that point. And I really wanted to like kind of bounce off the rock so that like some of the or not bounce off them, but so that some of the petals kind of get caught on the rock. And you can edit it later, but this is just to kind of get your kind of overarching idea. And so that's the, you know, that's the overarch, that's kind of the curve. And then you can click on all of these and just kind of, you know, edit them, put them how you like it, and then shift click to, oh, and see, this is very important, is that to remember to turn off point snapping, because it can really mess you up afterwards, because it when you just want to move a point, it's only wants it to move it to a, you know, another point in a different geometry. Bam, bam, bam. And then after that, you can resample to get some more points in there. If I go to the points view, you can kind of see, so I've added these points. Resample is basically just saying every 0.1 of a meter, add a point. And which is really handy kind of way of doing it, because you could say that I want it to be 10 points, but if I stretch this line out to be 100 times bigger, then that's not going to be. So this is essentially kind of like more like a density setting, and then it's very handy that I can just turn this into subdivision curves. So now it's like an actual kind of nice curve. Anyway, all that's to say is that I'm referencing this output of that curve in here. And what's cool is that if I go into here, it kind of gives you this guide geometry of this, basically this kind of force field that is created around this line. And you have these 3 different settings, which is basically just the follow scale is saying how much force is it going to tell whatever particles to follow this line. The suction scale is going to say how, if you're not quite at this line, how quickly these points should move towards this line if it's within this radiance. And then the orbit scale, which is like actually spinning around, and so that can go, I mean, they can all go plus or minus how much it's actually spinning around. So I've kind of like animated those in a way. If you shift click on these, you can kind of see, and then space F to kind of frame what you're working with. I think so. For this, I just have it waiting a second to start following, and then it goes up and then it goes down. The suction scale, I think, yeah, so it kind of just goes up with the world. I think just to kind of get the points to actually become like get into the flow, because as you'll see in a second, they actually don't all fit in right away. And then I have this one kind of like fluctuating a little bit so that it can spin, and then it's not. Just kind of tweaking just to try and make it look like it's following things. And this isn't actually being activated right away either. Oh no, I ended up actually just having that activated right away because it's being weird. when I didn't do that. But then I also have some noise to kind of to pick them up. Anyways, I'll shut up and just kind of show. Get rid of this point view. Wrong one. Did I have the merge somewhere? Oh yeah. So yeah, they kind of just get picked up by the wind, and then this is gonna be like it's gonna be like following. And they're kind of like, what are we gonna do? And you can see these they get caught on the rock, which is kind of neat. And they kind of go up, and then at this point, they kind of go up, and then you can see that it kind of just creates it reaches a threshold where it's like kind of where I'm trying to get it to, like it loses the shelter of the rock, and then or it loses the wind or something. Kind of like the winds change once it kind of bursts off there, and then all of a sudden the forces kind of go off, and now it didn't actually have gravity before, and then the gravity kind of kicks in, and then it just like scatters a little bit. And then I'm going to have a similar simulation coming out of the trees as well, coming out of the tree. So it's like, I think that'll hopefully kind of add to the epicness of the shot. Whereas like when you do see, they're like, in a weird way, they're joining their friends. They're like, it's going along, and then you see that they actually get scattered among all the different. We're introduced to the tree, but then we're also seeing that they're scattering with all their friends. So yeah, that's another thing. Lots of different things. I think I should probably call it. I've probably been going for a while here. I don't think there was anything else that I was gonna maybe talk about. I was gonna talk about height masks really briefly, just in terms of how they work. I was gonna do that while I was explaining how this kind of works. It's interesting, actually. I feel like I'm not sure if we can actually see the. I feel like we're not really getting the height map, actually. Okay, well, there's some height map. I think part of it is that we're not actually looking. Can't see shadows right now either. So that kind of helps a little bit to kind of see. But yeah, height maps are super key for so much of the CG world, and they're just so useful because you're able to give, this detailed depth information from a photograph. Which is really neat, and it's very simple. It's basically just white is the maximum amount to be displaced, and black is the minimum amount to be displaced, which is basically 0. And for a lot of rendering solutions, it can calculate this at render time, which ends up actually being way faster than having to do this in real time with your display. And just to I guess illustrate an extremely basic example of that, and then I swear I'm done. We have a grid here. Just give it some resolution. So we have some points to work with. So now I have these points. And so this is like a just every once in a while it tries to save. It's a really big file, so the autosave actually kind of slows things down a little bit. So this is something called attribute paint. Shift, scroll middle mouse to make things bigger. There we go. So this essentially is really good for just, you know, you can paint attributes onto things. It's cool, but it's not particularly procedural, because if I change the resolution of this, you can see how this gets messed up, because when I paint, it's essentially attaching a value to each point. So if you change how many points there are, then the point number changes, and so, you know, things will get messed up. But it can be very useful for doing a lot of different things. But this kind of is a good way of just illustrating this point, in that this is kind of made this mask, and you can see up in this attribute that it's made this attribute called mask 0 and 1. And so the things that I haven't painted have a value of 0. Things that I have painted have a value of 1. And you can see there's some kind of softening on the edge, so some values in between. And so if I just put down an attribute wrangle, which is just Houdini's way of, it's just a really easy way to put in really simple little snippets of code. And you can see that we lose that view, because this was actually a visualizer, just visualizing this mask attribute. But if we take this mask attribute and actually just change it in something as simple as CD, which stands for color, equals at mask, then you can see now it's taken the liberty of understanding the fact that this is a vector and this is a float, and just distributed this float among each value on the vector of the vector. And so now we've essentially just kind of turned this into a color, which is cool. And so with a value of 1 at its biggest points. So now if I were to do, say, another mask, paint. You can tell I don't use this very much. Let's just give this a different name. Just call it mask 2. And this time we're going to paint. So this essentially just decides what value you're using to paint something. So let's say that we're going to use a value of 0.5 this time. Let's do the corners for fun. Holy smokes, I'm good at art. Oh, look at that! Wow, wow, I did not realize I was so good at painting. That is cool. I gotta use that. Cool. So I'm gonna do a very similar thing. And so if I turn this off, you can see that I still have what I had up there. This is just like this visualizer, which is kind of not necessarily intuitive, but you have to know that this is literally what you're seeing here is actually just a visualizer, making visualizers of things. And that's another thing, a very neat thing about Houdini is you can make visualizers for virtually anything. I'd love to show that right now, but I would be going on too much of a tangent. But let's just put another snippet here, and then I'll just say at CD, which is color again, and this time I'll just say plus equals at mask 2. And so now I'm just essentially just taking that second mask and I'm just adding that to the existing color. But these are two separate values. So you can kind of see that this one is a value of 1. This is a value of 0.5. You know what? I'm feeling saucy. Let's just do one more here. I'll just try like 3 times to do that again. Oh yeah, so you can see that this is this is the sweet behind the scenes node network of how they made attribute paint, because it's just a bunch of nodes. A lot of these are just tools, which is cool. So let's do one more here. I'll call this mask 45. 456, just because, like, why the hell not? And then I'll make this 0.2. I'll just do a bunch of weird squigglies. Z is back. If you don't know about Z, holy smokes, like do some research. Z is crazy. Z is taking off right now. It's gonna be the next big thing. No, not S. Don't get confused. There's a lot of fake Zs out there. They're trying to steal all your money. See? Don't be fooled by the fake Zs. Okay, so we have that, and I'm just gonna copy and paste this one. I called this something like 456. Okay, so now we have our 3 different things. So imagine this was a texture. This was actually a photo. So I could theoretically just render this as just like a photo. It would just be like a square photo, black with, 3 different shades of white essentially. And the way that we could use it, and all this is just to say, I don't know if this is a useful demonstration, but in theory going forward, if we just had this same grid, and like, okay, sweet, we have this grid, that's cool, it has a color, that's all fine. Oh, look at that color. Wow. Just the dirtiest, nastiest. It's like, is that puke? Puke peach? Peach puke. So that's all fine. But we want to give this depth, right? So what we would do is we could just actually like, okay, well, we have this map. So let's actually take the color information from this map and actually turn it into height information. And with Houdini, it's like this is just like the most, like, you can't get any more bare bones of a demonstration of how simple height fields are so access the height information. So using the @p attribute, right? So it's a vector, and so if you want to access the y value, you can actually just go @p.y. And So if I kind of just say that it equals 1, then it shifts the whole thing up. But if I want to, say, shift all of y based on a color coordinate, I could say at p.y actually equals cd dot y. Because now I'm taking the r coordinate, like RGB, y, x, y, z. Or actually, no, let's say x. It doesn't matter because they're all the same, but and so actually I wouldn't want to go equals. I would actually want to go plus equals. Actually, this is actually, I don't want this at all. Because the color, I just added a new color, which is actually makes absolutely no sense because I'm using the color information. Yeah, we would add the peach afterwards. But essentially what's going on here is basically just all of the bits that were completely white have gone up an entire, so they would be a value of 1. So they've gone up 1. And then everything that was 0.5, they've gone, half of that. And then there's the squiggle marks that I think had a value of 0.2. And so that's just what it is. And you're working with 1. So if you want to just ever scale that, you could always just say times channel float, and then give it a name. So just scale. And this is like one of my favorite things about Houdini ever, is that you can kind of just do something like this, just to make a parameter. And then it's kind of made this parameter, but it defaults to 0, and then you have to press this button over here, and then it creates it. And then now I have this like scale over what this is. And I can kind of, however much I want. And then, it's endless because you just have so many. And then say I want to use a sine wave to yeah, now I'm just kind of like essentially just using a sine wave to drive this. To drive the multiplication of it going up and down. This is, I don't know why I chose that I wanted to do that, but it has nothing to do with height scale. But it's kind of hilarious. Let's just do something. Okay, well that hurts my eyes. So essentially what it's doing is it's referencing the frame number. And so it's actually just using as it goes through the different frames, it's cycling through a cycle of a sine wave. But I just wanted to just kind of just demonstrate, just because it can be kind of a tricky thing to get your head around if you don't actually see it. But it's literally just, you're just using the color value to shift or change something that's not color. And that is you know, what the CG world is all about. It's just, we seem to be, for whatever reason, we use 2D pictures to describe everything. And then that's what we got, and it's the best form that we have for conveying information in a very compact, smart way. And it's amazing what you can do with it. You can describe 3D data. You can even describe 3D geometry using complex 3D geometry, which I don't understand yet, but I will get there. Okay, this has gone on too long. I'm going to cut it off, but if you happen to be watching at this point, or you skipped ahead in your hair, and if anything seemed interesting, thanks for watching. I hope... I was doing a lot of rambling. I don't know how long I've been going, but I had fun. Sometimes I just get all these things get just built up inside of me, and I have to say them because they're exciting, and maybe it'll help somebody. One day, if you happen to be watching this and you have any questions whatsoever, please hit me up. I'm gonna try and keep going with this, and I'm already decided that I'm not gonna do my initial idea for this film. There's just no way I can pull all of it off, but I'm gonna do most of it and try and finish a to be continued, and then try and actually finish what I had intended within an extra couple weeks, for sure. And kind of like what I'm realizing is that, like, because this is like a filmmaking course, you know, it's not it's not my regular workflow necessarily, where I like to get something done, and every new problem I like to figure out properly and learn the right way, and know all these things, but in the realistic sense of, if this was an actual project with actual deadlines, then that's not how the CG world really actually works. And there's just a lot of faking it, and a lot of doing whatever you can to make it look good enough to pass. And that is hard for me. Probably gonna be the hardest part of going along this journey. So that's what I'm gonna try and do in the next couple of weeks, is pull off having something in 2 weeks, and then there'll be probably a period of looking back and actually figuring out how to do a lot of things properly. But anyways, I think I'm losing my voice here. Godspeed, love you, miss you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.